Thank you for joining with me. We are on day 77 of the Course Companion schedule, reading A Course in Miracles out of the complete and annotated edition edited by Robert Perry. Today is day 77 and we will be reading Cameo 18, Meditation and Guidance. I would like to pause here if you'd like to join me in prayer. Dear God, if left to my own devices, my perception will be skewed. I surrender to you everything that I think and feel. God, please take my past, plan my future, send your Spirit to redeem my mind that I might be set free. May I be your channel, God, and serve the world. May I become who you would have me be, do what you would have me do, go where you would have me go, and say what you would have me say, and to whom, dear God. God, I thank you for your vision today. Please allow me to set aside everything I think I know about everything, God. Please allow me to have an open mind and a new experience. Thank you. Cameo 18, Meditation and Guidance. The text section asking and following was edited from a lengthy set of personal notes that were not transcribed into the urtext. These notes dealt with Helen's difficulties with meditation and Bill's difficulties with guidance, both of which could be solved by the suspension of judgment. To make this material more applicable to all students, and thus suitable for the course, we had to remove about a third of it and reorder some of it as well. For this reason, it seemed appropriate to devote a cameo essay to the discourse in its original form. To Helen's question about her reactions to meditation, and also Bill's question. The reason for the fear reaction is quite apparent. You have not yet been able to suspend judgment and have merely succeeded in weakening your control over it. Since you have an unfortunate tendency to be self-punishing, you believe that control of judgment is a self-preserving function and therefore require it as a necessary defense of yourself. Weakening this defense deliberately is thus perceived as dangerous vulnerability which frightens you. 1. All quotations without page numbers in this cameo are from Helen's notes. Throughout these cameo essays, which they're essays by Robert Perry, we have corrected spelling errors in dictated material for ease in reading. This is Jesus' explanation of why Helen is finding meditation frightening. In meditation, she is attempting to still her mind, to clear it of the thick web of judgments that usually clogs it. However, rather than backing off from her judgments completely, that is, suspending them, she has only backed off far enough to loosen her control over them. The result is that her judgments have seemed to take on a life of their own. It's as if she has a case of mental Tourette syndrome, with her mind involuntarily blurting out insults. Keeping these judgments carefully in check has been a key defense of hers against self-condemnation, and so losing control of her judgments presents her with a frightening situation. Meditation has become a source of fear. Bill was right that you should ask before attempting meditation again. It would be very unwise to try it before we can do it together. As I told you last night, I assure you that I will be vigilant in identifying the right time, and as I told you very clearly, next time we will do it together. I did not tell you when that will be, because I do not know. You will tell me that, but may not recognize that you have done so. That is why you need me to relay your own message back to you. When we are both ready, it cannot be fearful." In the face of her fear, Jesus urges Helen to wait until she is ready before trying to meditate again. She won't know when she has reached this readiness, but when she has, something deep in her mind will whisper this news to Jesus, and he will then relay the message to her conscious mind. As he says, you need me to relay your own message back to you. At that point, according to Jesus, it will be crucial that he and Helen meditate together. If you are afraid of what your wayward impulses might do, the best thing to do is sit down and hold hands with someone you trust. In answer to Bill's question as to why he has so much difficulty in communication, you were right in what you said in the cab, and Bill could not listen. However, he seems to be able to listen quite carefully to the notes. Ask him, please, to listen very carefully to these. Now Jesus turns to Bill's question, which is about why Bill has so much difficulty in communication. This probably refers to Bill's difficulties in receiving communication from Jesus. This appears to be an ongoing question for Bill, since this was the subject of the guidance with which the dictation of the course began. Footnote 2. See Cameo 1. It also appears that Bill has resistance to the answer, for Helen apparently touched on the answer in something she said in the cab, and Bill could not listen. Since he wouldn't listen to the truth when it came from her, Jesus is now hoping he will listen when it comes from him. If you ask me for guidance, you have signified your willingness to give it over your own control, at least to some extent. Your frequent failure to ask at all indicates that at such times you are not willing to go even that far. But when you at least ask, you are acting on a cooperative thought, even though it may not lack ambivalence. You are therefore entitled to a specific answer, but unless you follow it without judging it, you will become defensive about the next steps which you will take. Jesus outlines a process in which the key element is the giving over of control. When you fail to ask for guidance, which Bill and Helen, along with the rest of us, frequently do, it is because you don't want to give over control of the situation. Conversely, when you do ask for guidance, that shows you have at least some willingness to give up control and to instead cooperate with Jesus. This willingness entitles you to receive a specific answer. However, unless you follow it without judging it, you will become defensive, and cooperation will break down again. As we will see, judging it is actually the key issue for Bill. You, Helen, asked merely what you should do now. The answer was to tell Jack to pick you up at 3. Bill's reaction to this was unfortunate, and yours was much more constructive, making it particularly unfortunate that Bill accepted your very correct response to his reactions with irritation. But this was inevitable because he had already given way to fear. Then you reacted to his mistake with irritation, and we lost our communication for a time. Let us try to reestablish our connection now. Bill was unwise in deciding on his own that unless you went to his apartment, Jack would be in trouble. This association meant that he saw only one alternative and was unable to keep an open mind. Certainly, he should be confident that any guidance which comes from me will not jeopardize anyone. It should also be noted that he projected his misperception onto you, assuming that you were counting on magic to get Jack to take you home, in spite of the traffic, and not realizing the situation as it is. I would like to tell him for you that this was a misperception of his, and although you have done this at times in the past, you were not doing it then. As you very correctly stated, but Bill could not listen at the time, you were merely reporting a message for which you had asked, and were not judging the outcome. Bill was. If you can continue not to evaluate my messages and merely follow them, they will lead to good for everyone. Since this is the same area of difficulty which is causing both of you trouble with meditation, practice in this is essential. We don't know the details of the situation, but the issue was clearly about Helen getting home from work. Among the possible options, she could 1. Get Jack, her taxi driver, to come pick her up and take her home in spite of traffic, or 2. Go to Bill's apartment instead. Faced with this issue of how to get home, Helen did the right thing. She asked for guidance, received a genuine message, and reported it to Bill. Bill, on the other hand, was not so open. He could only see one course of action. Unless Helen went to his apartment, Jack would be in trouble. Given the assumed rightness of this plan, it seemed obvious to Bill what Helen heard was an error. Indeed, in Bill's view, she didn't hear guidance at all. She merely inserted her own magical thinking where Jesus' voice should have been. It is true that she had done this at times before, but Jesus says that in this instance, Bill was projecting his own error onto her. It was his idea that was shutting out Jesus' voice, but he then projected this undesirable quality onto her guidance. Bill's whole error lay in assuming that his option, that Helen should go to his apartment, was the only option. Once that was assumed, then any other idea, including Jesus's, had to be judged as being in error. That is what Jesus means by judging the outcome rather than following his message. Since Bill assumed that only his idea would have a positive outcome, he had to judge Jesus's idea as leading to a negative outcome, and this would obviously result in not following it. Now we can see the connection between Helen's difficulties in meditation and Bill's difficulties with guidance. Both involve the chronic intrusion of judgment. Helen is unable to suspend her judgments during meditation, and Bill is unable to let go of his judgments about Jesus' guidance. I do not yet know what decisions those who are involved in what is happening later today will make, but I assure you with confidence, I urge you to share that whatever they may be can be utilized for good if you will let them. Why not unburden yourselves of this kind of responsibility which you cannot meet, and devote yourselves in peace to the many others which you can discharge without strain? It is your responsibility to recognize the difference. Any confusion in this respect is arrogance. Note also that I specifically told you in answer to your own question of this morning that miracles should be offered both to Art and to your brother. 3. Art was a colleague of Helen's. The brother referred to here was Helen's brother, Adolf. They are urgently needed for you, although this is not the spirit in which you must undertake them. You have hurt yourselves and need healing. It does not matter whether the people you think have hurt you have really thought hurtfully. You have. We must undo this, and your attempts will surely be blessed. The kind of responsibility which you cannot meet seems to be Helen and Bill predicting the decisions that people in their lives will make later in the day. This, of course, is an impossible undertaking. Even Jesus doesn't know what people will do with their free will, and to try to shoulder a burden so beyond them can only be a strain. It is also labeled arrogance. Among the responsibilities which you can discharge without strain seems to be Helen and Bill following Jesus' guidance for how to respond to the decisions these same people make. If Bill and Helen will do this, they will allow whatever those decisions may be to be utilized for good. Helen and Bill's role is to recognize the difference between these two responsibilities, set the first one aside, and place all their focus on the second. In the meantime, Jesus reminds Helen about the guidance she had received for that day. In the morning, she had asked him a question, which, judging from the answer, may have been about which miracles to perform that day, which would reflect instructions given earlier in the course itself. You should begin each day with the prayer, "Help me to perform whatever miracles you want of me today." The answer to her question was to offer miracles to both her brother Adolf and a colleague, Art. No doubt Adolf and Art had needs that Helen could help with, but there was more to these situations than that. These were relationships in which Helen likely felt injured. She had never been close to her brother, who was 14 years older than her. She said of him, he was very busy and did not seem to like little girls very much. 4. Autobiography 6. Where was I? And Art, who was co-director of the Department of Psychology with Bill, had a tremendous dislike of Helen and even urged Bill to fire her. 5. Carol M. Howe, Never Forget to Laugh, self-published, 98. Jesus, however, says that people's presumed hurtfulness toward Helen is actually irrelevant. It does not matter whether the people you think have hurt you have really thought hurtfully. What matters, he says, is that she has thought hurtfully of them. That is what has really hurt her, and that is why it is so urgent that she give them miracles. By doing so, she will not only be healing them, she will also be wiping away her own past lovelessness, through which she had injured herself. Since both of you have asked me to point up errors in perceiving, I would suggest that Bill review carefully his reactions to your suggestion that you go over the case at the Neurological Institute. Even though you did not ask, which was a mistake, Bill immediately evaluated the suggestion in terms of his own convenience, which was another mistake. Your motives were not uncharitable, even though your failure to ask for guidance was a sign of fear. You thought that Art would be able to understand Bill's going to the hospital, why he could not understand your presence at the Psychiatric Institute. Bill's reaction did not take alternate possibilities into account, which is one of his major problems. He should also train himself to learn that alternate possibilities are better not left up to him. Whenever he reacts as though they are, he will have trouble. If you had asked where to go and Bill had been willing to forego control of the decision, whatever you had done would have been only benign. Could we continue the day in that spirit? If you will help Bill to overcome his irritation, which is totally unjustified in spite of his misperception, you will not only help him, but enable both of us to help you. This will institute the chain of helpfulness and harmlessness, which always leads to the atonement and becomes a powerful part of its beneficence. Jesus now reviews another situation that would have been best served by Helen and Bill following guidance together. Helen had suggested that she and Bill go to the Neurological Institute to go over a case together. Even though she hadn't asked for guidance about this, which was a sign of fear, her heart was in the right place in that she chose that location out of consideration of what Art to whom she was supposed to give miracles that day, would find understandable. Bill, however, was irritated by this because he saw her idea only in terms of its inconvenience for him. This reaction, Jesus says, did not take alternate possibilities into account, which is one of his major problems. Indeed, this is the very same problem that we saw before. It seems that Bill has a habit of settling on a particular alternative and, in light of it, evaluating any other alternatives as incorrect. Sounds like he wants what he wants, which I can relate to. This apparently is the answer to his question as to why he has so much difficulty in communication with Jesus. The main source of Bill's problem, then, is post-guidance, after the guidance has been received. He narrowly evaluates any guidance against his own preferred option. Perhaps it is just this lack of openness to Jesus' direction that keeps him from hearing that direction in the first place. What Bill needs, then, is to let go of control. He needs to give over control by asking what to do. As he listens, he needs to give up control of what the alternatives are, realizing that alternative possibilities are better not left up to him. And once the guidance comes, he needs to forego control and let the guidance dictate what is actually done. Jesus then proposes that Bill and Helen continue the day with him in a new spirit, a spirit of asking for guidance and open-mindedly following whatever guidance is received. He further suggests that if she will help Bill get past his irritation, this will allow Bill and Jesus to turn around and help her, thus forging the chain of miracles that Jesus so often talks about. I offer far more than partial guidance, although you do not ask for more. The uneven quality of your skill in both asking and following my direction is due to the alternations you experience between ego and miracle-oriented perception. This is a strain, but fortunately one in which can be overcome along with the rest. There will never be a time when I do not will to try again. You might be gladdened by remembering that. Jesus' guidance is constant. It is there for all of Helen and Bill's situations. They, however, continually alternate between turning toward him and turning away. Sounds like me. As their desire for control kicks in, they turn away, refusing to ask for guidance, or if they ask, refusing to follow what they hear. Sounds like me. As they relax that need for control, they turn back toward him and both ask and follow. This state in which two opposing sides contend within, then, is a strain, and it can feel like there is no way out of this strain. Yet they can overcome it, and Jesus will always be there to assist them. His offer of help is unceasing. It never runs out, no matter how many times they fail to ask and to follow. They can always put their failures behind them and renew their efforts, remembering his promise. There will never be a time when I do not will to try again. And now we read Robert Perry's notes on day 77, Cameo 18, Meditation and Guidance. I've grown to love the material this cameo is about. I remember reading it in absence from Felicity in the early 90s, where a number of the things that Jesus says stuck in my mind for years. Once we got a hold of Helen's notes, we put a lot of work into transcribing this discourse in particular, as this set of notes is very hard to read. One effect of that is that the opening line, to Helen's questions about her reactions to meditation and also Bill's question is especially difficult to decipher. And without that, you don't know that the first two paragraphs are about meditation. One thing I love about this material is that you see that Jesus really means it when it comes to both meditation and guidance. He addresses here specific details about doing both things correctly. I don't experience Helen's problem with meditation, but I can easily imagine someone having that problem. In her attempts to still her mind, rather than suspending her judgments, Helen has simply weakened her control over them, and now she is understandably afraid of her out-of-control judgments. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I think Jesus' solution also makes sense. She needs to wait until he tells her she's ready again, and then she needs to consciously meditate with him. And I love that because that's how our meditations are in the workbook. It's meditating with, as one. As I say in the Cameo, if you are afraid of what your wayward impulses might do, the best thing to do is sit down and hold hands with someone you trust. The fact that he is both diagnosing a problem in meditation and prescribing a cure for the problem makes a clear statement. He is concerned with the health of her meditations. He doesn't tell her to stop them. He doesn't tell her it's all irrelevant. Rather, he is playing the role of meditation doctor, helping her meditations go from unwell to whole. You can also see just how serious he is here about asking for guidance, even about such minor matters as to how to get home from work. This material has made a major contribution to my understanding of guidance. What it has shown me is that it's our need to maintain control that messes up the guidance process. Amen. Our need for control is what makes us afraid to ask for guidance in the first place. Absolutely. Since we may not hear what we want. I live my life that way, the first part of my life for sure. This fear is perhaps the major reason we don't ask. Jesus specifically says your failure to ask for guidance was a sign of fear. Also, our need for control is what often makes us refuse to follow what we heard, since it may not agree with what we had seen as the only reasonable option. In hindsight, this tension between guidance and our desire for control is perfectly obvious. But it only becomes obvious to me once this material had pointed it out. Bill's resistance to following because the guidance seemed impossible reminds me of a recent experience of mine. Last Friday evening, I was waiting for Nicola to get home. On Fridays, her parents pick up the kids from school, and then she stops by their place after work and has some time with them before returning home with the kids at about 8:30. However, I had this fun idea that we could have a bit more of an evening together, so I called her at her parents' and suggest that I fix her a nice dinner of her choice, and that she get home at 8 instead of 8:30. However, I could tell that she really didn't want to slight her parents by cutting short their time together. It was clear that there was no way she would get home by 8. I felt very disappointed as I saw my plan for a nice evening crumble. She would get home later, and by the time she had answered emails and was ready to eat, it would be 9. And then, after a very long workday, she would probably pass out on the couch not much later than that. Not much of an evening together. So I asked within how to deal with the feelings I was having. To my surprise, however, I immediately heard that she would be home by 8. I was struck because that's definitely not what I asked. I asked for a way to view her getting home later that would relieve my bad feelings. It was a complete surprise then to be told that she would get home by 8, an idea which struck me as intriguing but very unlikely. It also brought up a control issue. Now that I expected her to get home at 8:30, I didn't want to stop and fix dinner right then. I could get another half hour of work in. But I forced myself to stop right then and fix her dinner. And sure enough, at 1 minute before 8, she and the kids walked in the door. Right now, when I told her I was going to relate this story in my daily post, she said, "Tell them the only reason I got home by 8 was that the kids were overtired and were playing up. And it was just easier to get them home." So I was right. When we talked, she had no intention of getting home early. This makes me all the more impressed with my guidance. It also highlights the importance of setting aside our need for control and following what we hear. 2 final points that always get me about the material in this cameo. First, we should stop worrying about what people will do and instead focus on letting what they do be utilized for good by following Jesus' guidance. And like Ken Wapnick said, the dictates of love, following the dictates of love. Second, and he doesn't say it in those words, but second, it doesn't matter if people have thought hurtfully of us. What matters is that we have thought hurtfully. By giving miracles to them, we can not only serve their needs, but also undo the damage we have done to ourselves. Now that I think about it, both points say the same thing. It doesn't matter what they think or do. What matters is our response. If we respond by following guidance and giving miracles, we can turn anything they do into good. Robert Perry. Thank you, Robert Perry. Thank you for joining with us. Day 77, Course Companions, Cameo 18, Meditation and Guidance.